It's a string.
All right. So I will hopefully have the recording from the other day if I can figure out how to make something work out great. If not, I'm just going to turn on the video from last year. It's not going to be as cool as Tuesday. Okay. I don't remember what I talked about, but I know it's not as cool. We talked a little bit about Python Faker and stuff like that on Tuesday. Use that with great responsibility. Okay. I'm not going to do the full Spider-Man talk there, but just use that with some full responsibility. Okay. But it should be a tool for you in this class to generate some fake data to fill in your project, right? So if you can't collect real data for whatever reason or something else, use it to generate some fake data. We talked about Rapid API. We used some examples off of what was in there, how to use the request module in Python in order to gather data in. And then you guys were going to go off and kind of pick out some other APIs. So I know Tanner sent me some of what we were going to do with some gaming stuff. So we're going to go through and take a look at that one. And then hopefully you guys have some other options you guys want to take a look at. So with the one he had, it was called Start GG. All right. And this one was what? It's kind of a competition. Is that right?
Basically, it's just a public website where they host brackets for anything. Like anyone can create a bracket. So I was hoping to find FHSU specific bracket and then get all of the wins and losses and create a win-loss ratio thing of Auburn.
Okay. So as he was explaining there, this is kind of an open website for competitions, and you can pull the statistics from different competitions in different areas, and it has an API type thing built in. So to get started with this one in particular, you have to register and then go ahead and log in, right? Give it all this information. I went ahead and created an account.
Which means Jason's going to be at the Snack Weekly tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe able to find my Call of Duty high school team one.
How many likes and retweets to get Barack Obama at the FHSU Weekly?
Sorry.
I want to play as Captain Falcon.
Okay. So once you get logged into this one, if you come down to your profile and go to developer settings, right, you can look a little bit into the API. So the way this API works is it is using what's called GraphQL under the hood. And GraphQL is sending out all these different frameworks and information and stuff in there. So what we want to know is useful references for popular languages. Come out here. Obviously, we care about Python. And so you can see different packages that would set up this GraphQL server. Well, we're not wanting a server, right? We want a client. Let's scroll down here and you can see these different options for clients. So we have GC or GQL, these other ones, SQL, Adrian, QClient, and GraphQuery. Which one do we pick? I don't know. You throw a dart at a window and you figure out which one you want to pick, right? So these are all native packages that somebody did the task of kind of cleaning up GraphQL, because you don't necessarily need that. If you just look at how you do this, you get an authentication token. You can send a request out, and it looks a little bit like these on the screen, which are super hard to read in that realm, right? But you can send it out like the request module that we sent and the other ones that we were sending there, right? So send requests, you send everything using their old REST API, or in this case, they have a different REST API. You send them with post requests, and you send them up with these different variables of queries and such. So all of this you could do by hand, or you could use one of those third-party packages that's meant to interact with GraphQL. If I were to pick one out of these, I would look for ones that have latest releases and then have something relatively soon, right? So something a month out, a week out is handy. All that tells me is that that's an active package, right? If it hasn't been updated in 4 years, it was probably somebody's pet project and they walked away, kind of thing. All right. So whether you use this one or what, it doesn't matter what you use, but you look at how they do their queries here. This is a mutation that's a little bit more complicated. This one is going to use more like HTTP client. And so you can see where it goes to the client and it's going to set up a query and then send that back. And this is a response query that comes out. This one would be similar. So for your particular case, we can even look at this first one here, which is just this GCQL. we pip install GQL all, and here's our basic usage on how to pull something out. So we're going to use this one as an example here. Let's go back to our PyCharm, get started up in a project. And again, every API you use out there is going to be different. But once you're used to using their styles, you know what to go look for. Go find their documentation, and that's the best place to start. So with this one, let's go ahead in this little task project here. This was a Flask. Oh, that's right. We were doing Flask. Let's just create a new basic project, pure Python. This window. Okay. And then in here, we need to pip install that other package. So let's pull up our terminal. And our documentation showed we needed to pip install here. So if we need all those packages, we could just do that. Pip install blah.
Well, let's install INF5 an idea. Can I just email it to you?
Sure.
My API.
That's weird. My phone won't connect to the internet. It says connection. Skeleton. That is it.
Okay. So once we have this package installed, if we go back to the API and we can take this basic usage and let's go out here to this main.py. Let's just copy and paste all that in. All right. So if we look at how this works, it's going to go out to their API, whatever this transport or whatever we're connecting to. So we know what that is. If we go back out to our start GG, it says this is our single endpoint now, right? So let's go back out here and let's replace this with our link. Okay. In the client, you have client transport and fetch a schema. In this query, we have get our contents or whatever we're trying to do. It gets a result back from that query, and then we can print the result. So we're going to have to tweak that a little bit because we're going to have to look and see what comes back out of here. This one assumes that we have this post going in with these variables. So let's go here. You can see that's a lot like our query, right? So let's see what this looks like. So here's our query, blah, 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 operation name and the variables we want. Okay, rate limits. So let's look at a query example. And did you have one of these that we know we want to hit as an entity out here on Start GG?
Now, I mean, not really.
I mean, is there a Fort Hays one out here?
Yeah. It should be possible.
Esports, Smash Brothers back in 2018?
I don't remember creating that one. Look up LBLS. I think it's posted. LBLS one.
Something like that. This one here.
Yeah, I think so. The one that hasn't started yet. Yeah, definitely that one.
Okay. So this may be one that we want to kind of chase down. He's got this tournament going on for the local esports group on campus. So let's go back to our code and we want to get event entrance, for example, right? We want to get all the entrants out of this particular one. So we're going to steal all of this. And this will go back into our query. So we want that query to be here.
The funny thing is Alan's always looking for the
Okay.
We gotta get Alan Bang. From what?
And this is going to stick in our event ID. We want to get page. So this is just kind of the format in order to pull all this out. This event ID, we need to gather all of that still. So this looks like an example one that it's trying to pull out and pull it. So let's see if we can at least get that set up. Some point here, it should be asking for our other data. So let's go back here. And then the response, we should get something like that. Okay. So what else? Let's see here. Full examples. That'd be a good one to get started. No, that's not what I want. Authentication, that's what I needed. So before you start everything, you got to get some kind of authentication to use this API, right? So when you do that, you can go out to you can go to your developer settings and you have to create this personalized token. All right. So this token is something that we can then type in. If I view info, you can see how I have this set up. You can create a third-party token if you want them to access, but for us, we just want personal access. All right, so now that we have that token, let's look at authentication. It shows us how to build it. We got a token, write it down because they don't ever show it to you again. And then this token must be sent in any API request to the server using the authorization bearer token here, right? So you'll need this token for making requests within the Explorer, etc. So this needs to be our header inside of here, inside our query. Everybody see what it's asking for there? So if we want to test a request, we could grab this example here. See if I can get a good example here. Of course, they send us a screenshot, not an actual thing, right? Super helpful. All right, so we have this query. Looks good. Data comes back and we have our variables and our headers.
You know, we definitely developers like working on that web page too, so they should have put it in the text and not a screenshot. They're like, yeah, screenshot be fine.
Let's see here. Trying to see what we need to adjust on our side. Let's clear this out. If we wanted to use that, we could do that. Client fetch, so. Let's see if this runs. Shouldn't. Query not defined, right? We got to set up what our query was. Let's go back to our query here. And that was query example. Event entrance. All right, so we're going to steal this one. Okay, so now we have a query. Maybe we can go through. Let's see what happens. Invalid syntax on this query. Yeah, that does not look right either. Why? Because this is not set up as a Python example.
Yeah, I think they use Java.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing too.
I'm trying to, I think that might have been one that I'm looking at here too.
I actually thought I had this tested before we came to class here to play with yours. I see now I did not have it set up like I thought I did, so send a request.
Also, I believe that this developer thing is still in like alpha stages, so it might be finicky.
Yeah, I may come back with this one as an example.
Okay. That's fine.
Because it's got a good idea. It's got good documentation. It's just adapting it to Python is your kicker, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. For you emailed me one, right?
Yeah.
Let's take a look at that one. I'm gonna pause the recording here.
Probably the IC user one. That's probably the
I
one.
barely know if this.
So this one's a pretty popular choice, right? The idea here is playing with Steam and getting out the forms and everything else. So as you can see here, there's a couple different Steam web APIs. You can get news, you can get stats, you can get user information, or you could get Team Fortress 2 stuff. So to get an API key with this one, we got to fill out a form. So we got to log in with our account and do all of that. Do you have one?
I do, yeah.
Damn, I thought
Only
we
log
had
in.
All right. Well, that's my problem. I'm not putting mine on the screen.
I can just, I can use the QR code to do it.
Gonna check Jason's play hours.
What do you play? Play anything at all?
I used to play a lot. I haven't played in a long time. Yeah, I used to play like a lot.
What games?
So let's see. I'm a big
He's a TF2 player.
I played some TF2. That was big back when I was in college. Lots of Counter-Strike back then. Man, there was lots of games. I would pull up my Steam and check, but it's been.
But then everyone's.
You want to know what it truly is later? Lately it's been Farming Simulator 22 and 19 and all those, right? Which my kids are like, that is the most boring game ever, whatever. I unfortunately got addicted to 19 and 22 and all the other ones. And then I went off and bought 70 acres. They didn't think it was funny anymore. And then I bought tractors and other stuff. So it became real. The addiction became real.
I love that.
And my kids told me I was no longer allowed to play Steam. I don't know if they were worried about me going back to play Quake or Call of Duty, and I started buying.
The Quake
I don't know.
Did just come out, or it's getting ready to.
So yeah, so I used to play a lot. There was a stretch in there where we played a lot of Dota back in the day. And all those were LAN people, but that comes back to Steam, right? So let's pull statistics. This is great because we're going to build this and I'm going to pull my kids' statistics and then we're going to figure out how much time is spent out there on that. Thing, right?
And also, they're even close to being professional gamers.
What do you?
Yeah, that's a great.
Are you
question.
with it, son? Are you with it, son?
I think you need to.
Your Honor, I have these documents here.
So registering for a Steam web API will enable you to access many Steam features from your own website. Enter in a domain name.
Yes, sir. Wow. It's really funny.
What domain do I have access to that I can do something in? All right, pause recording. Okay, so we're gonna throw in a domain there. This is my consulting company. That's fine. And I get a key that just got broadcasted and saved to everybody on the screen. Awesome. Guess I'll be trashing that one here after this call. All right, so notepad, let's store this key. During the time of this class, please do not destroy everything with my key. Okay, see, I can come back in here, hit revoke and trash it. That's fine. Okay, so what do we want to do with this web API? Well, we got to figure out what we just got access to. So let's go back to the API documentation. I'm assuming users, user. User. All right.
We gotta find Henry Cavill.
So we have a JSON return. We can use XML or we can use the Valve data format, which has some goofy stuff in it. We're probably going to want JSON returns. Okay. Let's see here. All these different options. All right, that's cool. Give me some kind of better SDK as to what we can do here.
There's source SDK and
Implementations, web API. Somebody's got to have a Steam API for that. Steam API Python, right? Super simple search.
At this day and age, I would hope so.
Okay, let's see what this one is. Peen Python, pip requirements, create a Steam web key, fly, get user data. Awesome. Okay. So how to do this? Right, copy and paste. So let's go into our project here. We need a terminal. And we're going to do a pip install Steam. Now, obviously, you'd want to create a new project for this because I just installed like 13 packages for that other project. Clean installs are the best installs. And we need beautiful soup. That's probably because it's pulling it down in XML format would be my assumption. And we got a Steam API, follow instructions, create an environment file. Aha. So this is when we create this file, that's what we're going to store our Steam key in. So it's not in our code, right? Remember how I talked about creating environment files or config files?
It's going to pull that from a separate document that the end user would never get to see.
Correct. Right. So in here, we could do something very similar where it says touch env. I don't think touch actually works in this, but we can try touch. Yeah, it's got touch. Okay. So no.
See,
touch is not found. Okay, yeah. So in our case, we're just going to create a new file in here, right? And new file, and we're going to call it .env. So an environment variable. And for our case, we need to put this inside of it. So we're just going to steal this code right here. Stick that in here. And we take this API key, we take that out, and we want our API key, which is this one. All right.
cool. And then do you need the little arrow thing at the end too?
No, nope. All that was for was to do the Linux version of doing that. If you were in Linux, that all made sense. Okay, so we save this. And there's a plugin to support environment files. Yeah, sure, install that. Let's like life easy. Why not?
Download and ramp.
Yeah. There we go. I don't know what it does. Probably just nuke it. Cybersecurity guy at his finest, right?
You're telling me that there's local .env support in my area?
You tell me that I have a Nigerian prince cousin willing to send me $3 million?
Wow.
He just needs my bank account information?
Okay, so we now have an environment variable, whatever. Let's go back to our main. Okay, follow instructions, right? Pretty simple. Search for a user. Well, let's search. All right.
Chairman.
Here, take this all out, dump this in. That's a pretty simple request, right? Config, blah, blah, decouple config, pulls from environment. Okay, let's run it. And we get squat. Why did we get squat? Yeah, we got no print, right? So we need this to return as something. So let's say result. And we could print that result. I don't know what the result is or what format, so we'll find out.
They use this ID as an example, but there's actually a main out there with that ID.
Okay, so we get some kind of dictionary back, probably a JSON type format, right? So we could do result.json. JSON, new JSON. There we go. Run that. And it doesn't know what a JSON is. All right, well, that's because it's in a dict object. All right, so it's automatically returning as a dictionary object, which means we could use pretty print.
Yes.
And we could pretty print. Okay. Yay. All right, so we get all the information about this particular person. Let's go check out their avatar. This could be scary.
What is that?
And that is that.
I can't see.
If you
There, I
if
saw
you
that.
wanted to, you could pull up mine.
Okay, so yeah, let's use somebody in the class. What you got?
I'm getting-
I wonder if I could make, I gotta figure out what my name is. I don't want to pull that up right now.
Don't wanna pull it up right now.
No, I don't want to pull that up right now.
almost
Please,
there.
fifth.
We're all immature when we're in college, right?
Yeah, we are.
All right, cool.
I can also pull up mine.
You
Lowercase
pull it up and you suddenly
E
see
N
1
N
friend requests.
ARIO 312.
Oh, sorry, can you say it again? But slowly?
Yeah.
It's
It's
on
not,
the
what do you
screen.
mean?
It's on a screen
Yeah.
recording too.
It's just my account name.
Okay, so we have Peyton's information up here. We can check out his avatar. Please be safe. Okay. Perfect.
So blurry.
Very blurry.
Obviously oh, there we go. Full resolution. Yes. Perfect. So we can get this out. We have his avatar hat. We have his avatar in a medium resolution format. This will be important information that we could store, right? So we have that. Community visibility state 3.
Why do they need it in 3 different, like?
So it returns it to you in that. What's handy about that, say we build our website, right? We want to build a quick Flask app. We don't have to automatically convert that. They have links already provided for us. So that means we don't have to install pill or some kind of imaging library on our server to display your resolution out. It's a great question.
Steam also on your profile just sizes those images.
Let's log out.
Yeah, it obviously uses them for 3 different ways, so it already generated them for you. Our last log off, does anybody know what this number would mean?
No.
Is that
All right, that's date since epoch. Does anybody know what epoch is?
like the universal computer time?
It is.
Like January of 19 something?
Very close.
1970.
Yep, January 1st of 1970. So this is the amount of seconds since January 1st, 1970. And this is used in Python, so we can convert this immediately to a date and time. Right? It always gives us epoch. It's the last X amount of seconds since it was last logged in. Let's see here. Persona name is 6th and 9th of August. I don't know what that is, but that's your persona. Here's your clan ID, your profile.
I know what that
And then
is.
what-
It's in 1945 years.
No,
I play board games. Anyway.
2 suns appeared on those 2 days.
Right.
What's time created? Is that the same thing?
So we can see his Steam profile here. And what was the other one that he gave us?
It's a time created, is that from?
This is the time since 1970 when you create it. So this is all cool stuff that we could pull out, right? This is in a dictionary called player, and then from player, we have a sub dictionary. So we have cool information. Let's for the time being, let's just store your information so we're not having to pull from the API, right? We all remember how to do that from Tuesday, and those that didn't get to watch the video, now you get to see it. So we create a new Python file we're going to call data, and we're going to dump this data in here. And then in our main application, instead of doing this request, we can do what? Anybody remember?
From data import player.
Yep. Perfect. Data player, actually players on the outside of this. So we need to set this as a variable as my data equals that, right? And then this side is not player, but my data. Okay. So now that we brought that in, we could just comment this stuff out for now. Code line comment. There we go. All right. So we have my data. And if we look at the structure, it would be my data, what? Player, right? That gives us the results out of this dictionary, right? So we want this dictionary. We're going to pull this player key. And then from there, we have all these different variables we could pull out. Let's pull out time created. So we want our time, and it's easier to copy and paste this so you have it. This. Like that, right? And if we printed this out, we should get that number. That, see what we get. And we get that at, right? So now let's take a look at import date time. Date time. There we go. And let's look at all the different functions date time has. So if we look at date time, if I could spell date right, time dot, and it could see all these other ones that come out. We have one called time delta. So let's look at time delta. And it says, give us the days as a float, the seconds as a float, and whatever's coming through there. So let's just pass in that. I don't think time delta is the one we actually want there.
It's still gonna print the.
Yeah, and one's days. This one's the time data delta since whenever. So it's not time delta. So what do we do if we don't know? Anybody know?
Documentation.
What's up?
Documentation.
Documentation, right? So if we come in here, you can actually pull up documentation in here, but in all else fails, come out here and look up documentation. So let's do Python date time. Right? There we go. And the documentation, we want to know the time since epoch. So let's look at time delta and see what that actually works with. So from time delta would be 36 days. This would give us the time delta for another year. That's not what we want. We have a date. We have from timestamp. Returns the local date corresponding to the POSIX timestamp. POSIX timestamp is exactly what we're looking for. That's our epoch time, right?
Okay.
So let's use from timestamp. And you will see we have date time dot date. And that will be from our, I still can't spell date time. That's why it's not pulling up. Date time dot date. And from date, we need to pass it our year end, month end, whatever. And that should actually be another one that's dot from timestamp. There we go. Or from, I say from
I think,
timestamp.
yeah, from.
Yeah. From timestamp. Okay. And our timestamp is this guy. Okay. And then once we get this, we can say, what was this? Time created, right? We're just going to call it the same thing so that we can use it. And then down here, we can just print time created. Run. Boom. So you created your profile on August 20th of 2017.
Huh.
So you've been playing for 6 years.
That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Sound about right? So that's how you can kind of adjust those numbers and play with the data that comes out. If we look at the rest of his data, there's some other stuff in here like profile state 1, right? So what is profile state 1? Well, we need to go look at the API and we need to find the documentation as to say what that is. So we can see where we used search by the user. We could search by their ID. We could get their friends list. See, we could see their recently played games. That might be something you want to do. So we can store that. Now, as we're pulling each one of these, obviously this is just a request in here, but we could create a function in our project that would go do this, right? That way, if on a website we had a drop down of what you want to do, then you could call that particular function. So we would probably start building out functions in our project as to go get this, go get that, and it would execute such and such code. So for our case of figuring out what your recently played games are, no, it wants your Steam ID out of here, right? So we would steal the Steam ID out of what you had before. So let's put this in here. Let's take out our comments for these guys. Okay. That all looks good. We're going to call this, and we're going to have to call this based off of your what? Steam ID, right? So what's your Steam ID out of the data?
That's second to the bottom one right there.
This guy right here, right? So we want to take this format. We're going to plug that here. And instead of time created, we want Steam ID. Okay.
Cool.
So that plugs that in. So now this will be our recently played. And then we can print that out and see what's going on.
The game that you recently played or the amount of hours on it?
I said recently played games, so maybe like.
Yeah, it's probably a list of games. There you go. So we found a bunch of games. Again, this is in that. So let's use Pretty Print so we can see what we got.
And is that, they showed playtime, is that in like minutes?
Wow.
Seconds or?
Good question. So we've got our app. We have the name of the game, Hearts of Iron,
Yeah.
Playtime Forever. Yeah, this is probably in seconds. Yep. So if we had this 46244, probably divide that by 60, get your minutes, and then take your minutes divided by hours. You can play it out from there. But instead of you having to do all that manual math, you could use something like date time, which has a way of processing that for you immediately. So you could give it seconds and it would give you back actual time, which is kind of what time delta was intended for, right? So yeah, you can play with these. You could get Counter-Strike Global Offensive.
That's crazy.
And these are all the most 7, right? So you got a total count of 7 of those that came back.
Can you
See-
adjust that total count? Or
What's that?
the total count that came back is our 7 most recent played games. Could you adjust that number to like be 3 or?
I'm guessing it would only do it within the last 2 weeks. So whatever you played within the last 2 weeks, given what's in that stats, but you could find that out if you could find the documentation for this.
Because that would be a-
API.
Yes,
otherwise
it
that'd be a
is.
lot
I
of data
believe-
for Steam to
I
store.
believe that is the last 2 weeks.
Yep. And you can see there's all sorts. So if we wanted to say, okay, what's more details on that app that you had there, right? So for example, we get our app ID back of this game, which is Wallpaper Engine, whatever, right? And we come in here and we can do a get app details and it can give us all sorts of information about that particular game.
Wow.
Right? So this is all information that you could use to build your own web app at this point. Yes, you can go get all this out of there, but maybe you want to build this portfolio of all the games you've ever played ever to the end of time, and you wanted a Flask app to deliver that. You could build that based off gathering all this data. So it's a really really cool way to gather all your stuff in. Now, if we really want to get the details of what each one of these are, we need to get the actual documentation for this web API. So we come here, Steam Web API. There you go. So this is going to give us the different things that we're looking for. So for example, if we had our profile visibility, if we go back and look at his, we can say profile visibility. I know that was in here somewhere.
I think it maybe is up more. No,
Something like that was in
There
here.
was 3,
I
wasn't
saw,
there?
yeah, it was 3. It's right up there. I see it.
Oh, community
Yeah.
disability state, yeah.
So that's 3, and 3 means that it's public. right? And you could change your profile visibility to 8 and some of the other ones down below. So this API or whatever showing up here is a good way for you to dig in and find out what does this stuff actually mean, and you can usually get it back. Generally, there's a much better API than what you see there. There should be. No, let's see. Get player summaries, get news app, friends list, player achievements, stats. Should be getting some more parameters back than what's up here.
Check his win-loss ratio on Hearts of Iron 4.
So anyway, that's another way of using an API. And in this case, instead of you guys having to hand code exactly what you want, we used a Python package that is already integrated for that. So what is this actually doing? Well, let's go take a look at the API because this is a great way to understand what that package does, right? So it has a module called Steam. We're going to look at Steam. And if we actually look at our code, we can follow this track, right? So in this track, we have Steam, users, get recently played games, right? So if we wanted to figure out all the different options we had under users, we could go in here to our Steam package, go to our users Python file, and we could look at this class of users and figure out all the different options we have. So we have search for user, search user details, friends list, and notice it tells you what the argument you need to pass in. So in this case, it's wanting the Steam ideas for each one of these. So I'm sure there's a documentation page that tells you all the different options out of here. If not, you can come in and pull all that out. It's probably in the README, and that's probably each one of these that it scrolled down and gave you options of. Right? If we look into Steam itself, this is the API client, and we can see where it has the client and the users, and it's got properties to that. If we go look at the users, and we look at the actual request. So let's look at search user, right? What that's doing is using the request module. If you guys remember how we did that out of Rapid API, right? We fed it a URL, which is this URL. We pass it parameters, in which case we wanted to do a search, and we're going to search. And this just has a check and balance that if that is a success, everybody remember what success means? When we do an HTTP request and we get a success, what code number is that?
200.
200, right? So this is checking to see if success is greater than or does not equal 1, meaning that we had a non-fail because it returns success as 0 or 1. If it's a 0, then we return that search message. Return, we get user details. So this is just an API that somebody built out a bunch of functions to go get the information and then retract that back to us, right? You guys can write this API if you wanted to, or if you wanted to deal directly with requests, you could do that. Somebody's taken the time to build all that for you. And a nice Python function that has some error checking built in and things like that. So do you write APIs from scratch? No. Do a Google search and see if somebody's written some code. Now, don't expect their code to be perfect, right? What do we do when we find a bunch of different ones that deal with the same API?
Probably take the most recently updated.
Take the most recently updated one is a great place to start. It's a rough rule of thumb. Don't use it forever, but it's a great way to know that somebody's actively trying to update this stuff. However, it could be somebody in a 601 Python class building their own API, right? So, and why? Because you're out here searching GitHub, and where are your projects all stored? GitHub, right? So nothing says that the code that's out here is not malicious or anything else. You kind of got to read through the code as you go through. All right. Anybody have any questions on this? Does anybody else have any other one that they want us to explore? Steam's a good one. I like Steam. We'll come back to that.
I would imagine Steam has definitely enough APIs to do a bunch of stuff with it with how old the client is.
Yeah. So one thing I need to do is come back out here. Why I just shared that to everybody. Is destroy that key, right? So I come back out here to the Steam community. I have this. Where's my other one? Go back one, forward one.
Is it still open somewhere?
Right on.
Do we want to
I don't know.
go back there maybe?
Somewhere. There we go. Filling out this form. Revoke. Revoke. And now you guys can't steal my stuff.
Nice.
Okay. I'm also logged in as you, so I'm going to go ahead and log out. So that I don't mess with your stuff. Log out. Cool.
I like that there was an API specific for TF2.
Yeah,
I mean,
Done.
didn't they make that game?
TF2 was
Did they make that?
hugely
Valve
popular.
doesn't make games, what are you talking about?
All right. Anybody else got some examples they want to roll through? Adam, you got one by chance? Or you got an idea of what kind of API you want to play with?
I was gonna play with that recipe one we were looking at yesterday.
The which one?
It was the recipe one.
Oh, the recipe one. Yeah.
Hmm.
So let's see here. That was rapid APIs.
Yes.
Let's see. Product API hub. Oh, this is where you got log in. And that's the wrong login. Let's go here.
You can just ask financial aid for a little bit more money, but technically it's not Flash, so I mean, you should just give me an extra $1,000.
And then Tisa makes.
Okay. So here's a good example of one that I just showed on the screen again for everybody. Why? Now I gotta go trash that key.
Wasn't that one brand new?
With the key
That one right there, the recipe.
Oh, that was one for other APIs I've been playing with. So yeah, this is the one you were playing with, right, Adam?
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
was looking at doing.
So, yep, you can come out here and you can see in Python requests, and you can see what the query string is with all the different options out here. Again, if you've got a couple of these you want, write your own function that goes and does this request, right? So you gather this kind of information from the user and you build this query string to actually connect to the API and pull that stats. So if we were building a website to get all this information and pull a request for a complex search, we would have to get all these different options from those users.
Mhm.
Now, this one, there may very well be a Python API that's native to this, and then you could go and pull that out. Yeah, let's not do Bitcoin scams, all right? Pricing, this one's kind of cool. You can get a bunch of different requests, so. Yep. All right. Does everybody feel at least comfortable on tackling some API? Well, right, yeah.
When it works, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole idea is, if you don't know how to use the API, what's the first thing you got to do?
Documentation.
ChatGPT.
Documentation.
Documentation, right? So we always want to try to read through the documentation, search that out. Once we get the documentation for some API, what's the next thing you should probably do?
Find the Python version.
See if there's some kind of Python integration already for that API. That way you're not having to write the request from scratch and do all that. Not that you can't do it, but see if somebody's already done that work for you, right? There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. All right. If there's no Python API, power to you, you get to write your own, right? So what that means is don't try to write out every single option in there. Just use what you want to use, right? You're not writing an API for somebody else to use. If you were, then you would be writing the full-blown API package. And if you're that bored and want to do that, then go ahead. For this class, maybe you want to build a trimmed API that just does the requests that you care about in your program. Maybe you don't want to install somebody else's full-length package. You just wanted to do this, so write your own, right? But do not be afraid to go pip install something else. Like that is just common sense and smart. Okay. What else can we talk about with APIs?
Is it API we pick and we use for our project later on?
Do what now?
The APIs that we're looking at, do we have to pick one to use like for a project?
Eventually,
just-
yes.
Okay.
Yep. So there'll be like the first mini project that you guys will do. You'll have to pick an API or you'll generate your own fake data with Python to do some number crunching on a bunch of other stuff. So only certain APIs would make sense for that one, right? You'll find out what the requirements are. It may work with Steam, it may not work with Steam. You may have to go pick a different API for that. Or at least a way to get data from that. In your final project, yes, your final project has to be centered around some form of an API, right? So you can build your own website, but it needs to gather something from another API and then present that. It may not be a whole lot. So in other words, you may use an API You just wanted a cool map feature on your website. You have this whole blown website, but you wanted a really cool map feature in there. Well, maybe you would use something like Google Maps as API to program the location of that website, right? So you don't have to have this big blown project all centered around an API. You could, but maybe you just need to add that little component. You add a Google Map API, boom, you used an API and it's in your project.
Some kid was working on that. It was a Twitter post I saw ages ago where this kid had started a project where he was using StarGG to show you all the active tournaments within an area, and he used a Google Maps thing to push it through. I think he's still developing it, but it was a pretty cool concept.
Yep.
So you can use two APIs in like one project.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So if I wanted to compare like the iSteam user stats and then just my stats, because the user stats one is global information for
Uh-huh.
the game. So I can compare the global information to my information.
Absolutely.
Those are two different APIs.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, you can use 20 APIs in a project if you wanted to, but just don't get scope creep, right? And we'll talk about that when we get to projects. So really, this whole week was designed around you guys getting comfortable going out, finding APIs, finding something to play with, how to gather the data from that user. And really, it's the practice of going through and finding documentation, the practice of going through finding Python packages that would relate to it, that kind of thing. If not, know that if you have to write one from scratch, what are you going to do?
Really documented and
Right.
try.
Switch projects.
There you go. Probably switch your project,
I'm not
right?
about to program a whole API.
If you realize that, hey, there is no Python here, I'm gonna have to program this from scratch, and this is gonna take way more than this class, scrap your project, find something else. That comes back to scope creep. And when you're doing these, you are mini project managers for 4 projects, 5 projects in this class, right? You only have a week to do this, so should you do a project that has way too many features on it? No, you have to turn something in. So just trim down to what you can do and build on it, which means on everything you do, always build in phases.
Yeah.
All right. That's the number one thing I'm trying to train you in this class that is in part of the course objectives, but not kind of in the course objectives, is making sure that you pick projects that you can accomplish in a certain amount of time. And that you implement phase 1. I just want to get the API up and working. Boom, got that done. Phase 2, I just want to pull these stats and that's it. Phase 3, maybe I want to implement all this stuff in the future, but I don't try to implement all that future stuff right now. The homework assignments due on Sunday at midnight, right? No, I'm saying in general.
I can't do that. I was caught up on all my
I'm saying in general, when your homework assignments due on Sunday, don't be trying to write a whole API to reconnect everything.
Can't do that. Can't do that.
All right. Any other questions on APIs? Because I may not get the video working for Tuesday, I will go back and show you Python Faker one more time. Not to mention, you guys seem to enjoy that one. So I put a link out here. Python Faker is just a package that's going to help generate fake data for you. This could be used to bootstrap your database, could be used to help you build a website, or maybe you just want to create 50 people with random characters and be that person for a day. I don't know what your life history is, but you could do it. So what's the idea? The idea is that it will create random data for you. So you can do something like pip install faker, and then you can call out for a random name, address, text, or you could build an entire profile of all the stuff in there. One thing I didn't show you guys is the localization part of that. So if we had from Python or from faker, import faker, right? Fake equals faker, right? But this time we have ITIT in here, right? ENUS means that we want English US,
Oh, that's
right? If I said ITIT, it's Italian from Italy. And what that will do is generate numbers that are from Italy, right? So the British use a different string of numbers than we do in the US or Africa or China or whatever. This allows you to set the localization, then generate all that profile based off that. So if I say, give me a random address, it's going to build something random in the United States. If I say Italy, it's going to build me a random address in Italy.
So you don't get like a Stephen Smith in the middle of Siberia or something like that?
Exactly. And if you want to tell it multiple locations, you could do that as a list. right? And then it's gonna randomly pull a bunch of people from all those different locations. All right. You can use this on a command line if you just like Python and start writing stuff. Faker, give me address, boom, address. If I want to do this, you could script it out. You could create your own provider, which means you create your own way of generating whatever you want it to. There's ones in, which is how the community did theirs, right? So you can get like a jokes one in here and it'll randomly create jokes. You can get it to create geoscience data, all sorts of random numbers that you may want to be in here. All right. So again, don't be afraid to use Python Faker to generate some random stuff so that you can use that in your project to create things. All right. We'll cover that. I'm going to go ahead and kill the video here.